Carolina has finally announced their GM pick, but it's not just a GM pick. The Tar Heels are diving headfirst into a full-on front office. This is great for the future of Carolina basketball.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Wednesday, February 26th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making this your first listen or watch of the day. Special shout out to all the Locked On Tar Heels insiders joining us, the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, and of course, all our great everydayers who are here with us. You know who I'm talking about, Pat Kilby. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I just mentioned it, but our good buddy, Coach Pat Kilby, is here. His Dale Pirates are thick in the middle of their playoffs, just absolutely boat racing everybody so far. Pat, when's the next game? Friday night, is that right?
Friday night, 7:30, area finals.
Area finals, man. And if y'all win that, what's next?
Area finals would send us to the state tournament, which is the final 8 teams in the state of Oklahoma.
So this round is basically the Sweet 16 coming up.
Essentially, yes, sir. Yep.
Let's get after it. Go Dale Pirates. We're behind you guys. Keep us up to date always. All right, y'all. There's some high-level Carolina conversations to have today, and Pat Kilby and I are very much looking forward to having these. I know a lot of you are because you've reached out to ask about it, so very excited about it. We're going to talk about Coach Davis's contract extension that was randomly announced 2 months after it was signed. We will talk about Carolina. What would be the best seed for Carolina in the ACC tournament to help them keep building out their resume? But Pat Kilby, very first, we got to get into this GM conversation. Coach Davis obviously made light of this at his radio show a couple weeks ago, then was perceived to have reeled it back in, but really he was just saying, I want to focus on basketball right now, not the GM conversation. That's all that was. And then on Tuesday, yesterday, Carolina formally announces the hiring of Jim Tanner, and this title pack is really interesting to me, as the executive director and general manager. Let me just give us a couple quotes from the official release, just so we can get to know Jim a little bit. Quote, Jim Tanner is the founder and president of Tandem Sports and Entertainment, a full-service agency representing professional athletes, coaches, and broadcasters. Jim has represented more than 70 NBA players, including 40 first-round NBA draft picks, 12 top 5 NBA draft picks, and 6 Naismith Hall of Fame inductees. He's negotiated more than $1 billion in contracts for his clients. In this role, folks, catch this. This is critical. Tanner will, among other things, help manage the construction of the roster, negotiate contracts, identify and hire new scouting and analytics staff, and spearhead player development programs. Jim is a 1990 UNC grad. His kids went to Carolina. He's originally from High Point, North Carolina. He has repped 17 Tar Heels in their professional careers, and he himself says this, and then Pac will get into it. Quote, both of my kids and I went to Carolina, and we owe so much as a family to this university. This is such an exciting opportunity, and I couldn't be more thrilled. The landscape of college basketball has changed dramatically in a short period of time with NIL, collectives, and the transfer portal. It's a highly competitive and constantly evolving environment. And I love this statement, Pat Kilby, right here. I look forward to using my 28 years of experience recruiting and representing players to help position UNC as strategic, adaptive, and innovative in scouting and attracting top domestic and international talent while staying true to the principles and values that have defined Carolina basketball over the years, end quote. Pat Kilby, that is good stuff. What is your initial response to this news that came out on Tuesday?
Well, I was thrilled. Of all the candidates I've read about, heard about, Jim Tanner is by far the one that I was most excited about, because it does feel like, it was cool to kind of keep it in the family or whatever. You know, we'd had that talk. Do we want a Carolina guy? Do we want someone that's not from Carolina, someone that's a little bit different? And he kind of bridges that gap, right? Like he is from Carolina, and he has those ties and those connections, and he's familiar with the university, and he knows what North Carolina is grounded by. but he also has built a career in the NBA representing athletes playing in the NBA, coaches, broadcasters. He knows what the value of players are. He knows how to construct rosters and what goes into that, and the connections that can help him with that also. And so, he's just really well versed. And I think of all the GMs I know of in college basketball, he may very well be the most qualified, if not one of the most qualified GMs there is. And so,
Take that, Woj.
yeah, exactly. So I think it's just a great hire all around, and like I said, it bridges that gap between keeping it in the family, but also getting somebody that's very well connected and is brilliant in their own right. And so I think this is a home run hire for North Carolina.
That's a great way to put it. Pack, I hadn't thought about this until exactly what you just said. When Carolina fired Matt Doherty, Roy Williams was the obvious and perfect person to be the next head coach. And that was a marriage of keeping it in the family and who you should go after as the number one choice, even if he wasn't in the family, right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this feels very similar to me to that. Even if Jim Tanner was not a Tar Heel, he is an obvious person you would sprint to and offer as much money as you could to hire him. And so I love your point there, man, that this is a great cross section of, yes, he's in the family, but this is a dude, man. He's got all of those accolades that you just talked about. Something I hadn't thought about until we're just talking right now is because of everything that's on his resume, everything that's on his CV. Man, he is going to be a guy that players come in, whether transfers, high school, international, whatever, and say, oh, this is a dude that knows the NBA, has connections, can get me there, alongside Hubert Davis, right? Like they both have those ties, and it just further strengthens Carolina being able to reach out in those ways. So I think that's a big win of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reading, doing some of my own research on him, and what I found was that when Roy Williams was the coach, he actually would use Jim Tanner as kind of a buffer between the NBA and these college guys trying to figure out whether or not they were going to go to the NBA or return for another year. And so to me, that just goes to show he's got connections.
Yep.
And he knows how to get guys to the next level, what they're looking for, how they're looking to go about it, how they're looking to do it. And so that's a great thing to have, but he also has the roster construction side of it, right? He knows because he's been an agent and he's represented 70 NBA players. He knows what players are worth. He knows what contracts look like. He knows what good deals are, and he knows how to take care of those things. And so, man, I just see this as a huge, huge win for North Carolina basketball.
And I love that point, Pack. Like, folks, you've always, in the Roy Williams era, you would always hear the general, like, hey, we've been talking to NBA people to figure out like where the landing spot is and where you might get drafted. That random general person out there is Jim Tanner, right? Like that is who we're talking about. And that again is why this is so important. Pack, I think a big part of this for me is in the moment of hiring Bill Belichick and all the money given to go all in on football, both from hiring him and his staff and money allocated for NIL for players. I think there was a big fear, and I had that fear. I'll go ahead and put my hand up, that Carolina was going to forsake where their bread was buttered, forget where their bed was made, whatever phrase you want to use. And this is first and foremost a basketball school, but are we trying to go all in on football and forsaking basketball? Because that's what it felt like, Pack. Did I maybe you felt like that? I know I certainly did. And this to me is the first clear and definitive indication that Carolina is going all in on both. Bubba Cunningham had said that at the time. I personally didn't believe it, but now I do. Where are you at?
Well, I completely agree. When the money was poured into football for Bill Belichick and his staff and just a revamp of that program, that was kind of at the same time that we were all sitting here thinking, why didn't we spend more money on basketball players for our roster? And what's going on here? Is Carolina hurting for money? We were kind of having those questions going on in our mind. And then Carolina comes out and just pours money into football. And then we're going, uh-oh, And now we're seeing that we're making a commitment to athletics as a whole. And I think it's the best commitment any school can make. Athletics, especially in the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, that is, to use what you said earlier, that's where your bread is buttered. I mean, kids will go to schools and not even be involved as a player, as an athlete, but just because that's who they're a fan of. Or, like I grew up a North Carolina fan. Am I good enough to play at North Carolina? No, but I would love to go to school there because that's who I'm a fan of. It's just athletics it pays huge dividends, not just for the athletes and the coaches there on campus, but for the entire school. And so I think it's a very worthy investment from North Carolina. And I'm glad to see that we're finally not just getting into the game. We're setting the curve. I think Carolina's finally making a huge contribution monetarily, but also in growing our staff, making sure we're bringing the right guys in, making sure we're upping our NIL money. I just think this is a big step forward for UNC.
Yes, indeed. Carolina should be leading the charge, and that's what it seems like they're doing, because according to CBS's Matt Norlander, they ain't just going in on a GM. It might be a whole front office. So we want to talk about that. Who's going to be in charge of this thing, and why is right now the right time to do this? Plus, Hubert Davis contract extension. Oh boy, there's so much more still to talk about. We'll get to all of it in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for an even bigger payout, you can combine live bets into a same-game parlay. It's great because when you get paid, you win instantly. How about Carolina's win total for football this upcoming season? Funny as we're talking about Bill Belichick and all that money spent. It's set at 7.5 wins at FanDuel. If you think Carolina will get more, take the over. If you think it'd be less, go with the under. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Oh, man, we're talking about Carolina announcing the hiring of a GM right here on February 25th. Pat Kilby, I think maybe a lot of people thought it would happen after the season was over or sometime in the summer. Why is right now the right time to go ahead and make this hire, in your opinion?
Well, I can see why people would think that, but truthfully, in today's game, the offseason is earlier than it's ever been. I mean, for a lot of teams, it's as soon as their conference tournament is over, their players are notifying coaches, I'm going to the portal. Or maybe coaches are saying, you need to go to the portal. So, and Carolina hopefully is playing, into the ACC tournament, into the NCAA tournament. And so having a GM, this is going to be super beneficial. Having a GM allows Carolina to start that process of talking with players in the portal and figuring out who they want to get, starting to target them, starting to develop relationships with them, maybe putting together packages for them to try and get them to commit to the University of North Carolina. And that allows for our coaching staff to do their job, to coach the team, and try to get as far into that March Madness bracket as they can get. But we're not getting behind the 8 ball in the transfer portal side of things or in the recruiting side of things. And so it's just that's what college basketball has evolved into now. And it's the perfect timing for that, because now Jim Tanner and whoever he hires and brings with him, they can start to get to Chapel Hill. They can get their feet set in. They can get grounded, and they can start going to work. And so I think it's perfect time because, like I said, the off season, it's here. It's almost here. It's earlier than ever before. And so and especially with a lot of question marks for next year's roster, we've got to hit the ground running. And so I'm glad they made the hire when they did.
And thankfully, the transfer portal opening day is pushed back a little bit. now, but still not all that much. And let's compare it again to Carolina football. A lot of people thought Carolina bungled the timing of that, or at least Coach Belichick did, because the portal's open and they haven't announced anything yet. And we don't know who it is, who the GM's going to be. And with this, the second the portal's open, we're already locked and loaded and ready to go because Jim Tanner is hired now, right? Like he's got a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, Pack. Like, let's identify that. But I love that quote going back to it again. Positioning UNC as strategic, adaptive, and innovative in scouting and attracting top domestic and international talent while basically being Carolina. Man, I love all of that. Now, as part of all of this, now we got to get into the personnel side of it, both on the GM side and at the head coaching side. You just talked about freeing up the coaches to do what they do, coaching. That means when you're in the postseason, you don't have to worry now about trying to do all the NIL stuff because your GM and his staff is doing that for you and you can just coach your basketball team. So, Pack, we're going to find out for several more years if Coach Davis is the guy that's able to do that now with his GM. Why? Because on Tuesday also, Brian Murphy reported, and again, like a highly trustworthy investigative reporter, you can take this to the bank, let everyone know about Coach Davis's contract extension, which was proposed to him last fall and then was signed in December. And then and this is going to run through the 29-30 season is the extension now. So Pat Kilby, feels like a weird time for this news to come out. Why didn't they just announce it with the press release when it was signed? All of this kind of, that's kind of weird. What's going on there? Why does it make any sense to you to come out now? Why do you think that happened?
I actually think it makes a lot of sense. For several reasons. Number one, I think it shows some alignment from the university. Bubba Cunningham, Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner, they're committed to making the basketball program be the best basketball program that it can be. And it shows that they're kind of aligned with each other in that. Secondly, I think it shows some stability because there's been some questions from the fan base. Is Hubert Davis the guy? And I think whether we are willing to admit it or not, we may have all had some doubts or thoughts, concerns in the back of our mind. Is Hubert Davis the right guy? And if we're thinking that and we're voicing that on social media or wherever else, recruits are noticing that. People notice those things. And so that might get in the way of recruiting. So that kind of squashes any of those rumors that Hubert Davis might be on the hot seat or whatever. No, Carolina's moving forward with him. I think that's what we learned today. Now, not to say that he wouldn't be on the hot seat next year if we somehow miss the tournament this year, which I guess is a possibility. So he's not totally, out of the woods, but it does show Carolina's committed to him moving forward. And so I think those things are really important because, for one, if you're going to hire a GM, there's got to be alignment there between the GM and the coach. Yep. And I think it shows that and that they're willing to do that moving forward. But it also shows some stability in the recruiting process. Hey, if I commit to Carolina, this is going to be who I'm playing for.
That's
not
absolutely right.
In a year. So
absolutely right. Well, and it gets bigger than that, Pack, because it's potentially going to be a full-on front office affair for Carolina. As you had said to me before we started taping, college basketball programs are hiring GMs. Carolina's getting a front office. As you said earlier on the show, Carolina is the one trying to lead the charge, and that's where they should be. The Tar Heels should be out front with the baton in hand saying, follow me, boys, we're going to the future. Because per CBS's Matt Norlander, quote, UNC is aggressively pivoting to hire a full-on front office per sources. Alum Buzz Peterson is also joining in a decision-making role in addition to more staff under new GM Jim Tanner. I'm told Tanner could be the highest paid GM in all of college basketball with a salary north of $1 million. The irony is UNC Basketball has somehow rallied to infuse more than 40 million, maybe 50 in football and hoops, yet it was nowhere near the top in NIL resources last year. Had it been, all of these hirings might not have been necessary because UNC might have built its roster better with that money. End quote. So, Pat, full on front office, the GM, Jim Tanner, and Hubert Davis signed to a contract extension. So I think the natural question we ask is, you're bringing all these people together. Who's in charge? Who's the lead dog in the room? How do you navigate that?
I don't know. I'm very intrigued by that situation, because everything I kept reading today is UNC is hiring. UNC has selected. And that makes me wonder, how much say does Hubert Davis have in this hiring process versus, say, Bubba Cunningham or the president of the university? So it makes me wonder kind of who is expected to be in charge there. And then, you kind of alluded to this earlier about Jim Tanner's title, executive director and general manager. What all does that entail? I know we talked about a front office. So is executive director just mean that he's over those people that are kind of manning the front office of North Carolina basketball? Or is he going to be the final say-so like a GM would be in the NBA or the NFL? There's a lot of questions there, but I think there is some understanding, I guess, to be gained from the fact that Hubert got his contract extension. From the best I can tell, what I've read on Inside Carolina and some other things, Hubert Davis was involved in the process. I think at least it's going to be two guys or front office and coaching staff, I should put it that way, working together to build the roster. But I guess I can't say for sure who would be the final say so.
Right.
And I don't know, but it's going to be super intriguing to find out, I think, how they make all that work. Because that's going to be a lot of voices in the room having opinions on how to build out that roster.
Yep. And the buck's got to stop with somebody.
It does. Yeah. There's got to be somebody that's the final say so. And so,
I think it's going to take some time to figure out in practice, how do we do this? What does it look like? And I think what all of these men and women, if there are women involved, the key thing is they always have to be able to find their way back to, we all want the best for North Carolina. So what is best for the current and future of this basketball team? And if we all have our eyes fixed on that, that's the lens through which we can look at this thing. And I think that's the way to go. Now, Pack, I do want to push back slightly on something Matt Norlander said, talking about if Carolina had spent all this money on buying their roster for this year, they might not have had to hire these roles. My pushback, though, is that you could buy a roster for 1 year, or you could hire these roles for now and the future. These people won't all be in these roles forever, but you've set up these roles that somebody will be in them. And I think that is the big win. And so I'm glad Carolina spent the money here. Plus, he said elsewhere that he believes Carolina is looking to get the NIL pool up to $6 million a year. So I that's my one pushback with Matt's take on that, is I think this is actually better in the long run. Pack, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally think it's better in the long run. And, sometimes it's a setback can lead to thinking, how do we need to get better? And I think Carolina looked at this and thought, not how do we need to get better? How do we need to get ahead of everybody? College basketball programs are hiring GMs. Yeah, they ain't hiring front offices. Carolina is. We're getting Jim Tanner and 3 or 4 other people that know what the heck they're doing and know what's going on and are going to do a great job. And so that's trend setting, I think. And that's how you solve problems. You don't look and say, oh, how can we catch up to Kentucky and Duke and UCLA? You say, how can we get ahead of them? And that's exactly what Carolina's done here. And I'm here for it. And I don't think it would have happened had we not had these setbacks. I think everything would have probably stayed status quo. So in some ways, I'm kind of glad that we had to get out of our comfort zone a little bit and say, you know what, we're going to have to pour some money into this and find a way to get better.
If we zoom out and see that bigger picture, yes, this year has been frustrating on a lot of levels. We're riding a fun streak right now, Pack. Hopefully they can keep it going. But I think you're right. I think it's worth seeing what's going on now and how things were bungled last offseason to never do that again. We're going to fix this and we're going to get it right. Well, Pack, these are fun conversations. We're going to have to continue to have them as this GM conversation, this front office conversation evolve, seeing what Carolina is doing. But we can't get too far away from this year. The ACC tournament is just a couple weeks away, Pack. And Carolina right now is sitting in the 6th seed position. And my question for us to unpack here in the final couple minutes, where is the best spot for Carolina to land in the ACC tournament to help filling out their resume? We're going to have a little bit of a conversation about that in just a second. All right, Pack, the ACC tournament is coming up pretty soon. As a reminder for folks, the ACC, and I think this is kind of dumb, this is a conversation for another day, kept the bracket the same as when there were 15 teams. So the bottom 3 teams won't make it in. Have 16. It's how brackets work. And you could still do your single and double buys with 16, but it just makes more sense. Anyway, the whole thing is bonkers to me. But that's a conversation for another day. But Carolina, as things stand right now, are sitting in 6th place. Let me give you the standings. Duke, number 1 overall, 16-1. Louisville, 15-2 after their win. They were winning. I don't know if that game's over yet. They're about to win over Virginia Tech in real time here. And then Clemson at 14-2, half game back. They just haven't played yet midweek this week. Wake and SMU tied in 4th right now at 11-5. Then is Carolina at 11-6. After the Tar Heels, Stanford is 9-7, Georgia Tech 8-9, and Virginia Tech is just about to fall to 7-10. So, Pack, with the amount of games remaining, Carolina already has a narrow gap of where they could fall. They cannot surpass Clemson or Louisville, but they could get by SMU and Wake. So the highest Carolina could finish is 4, which would be a double bye. The lowest they could finish is with Virginia Tech about to lose. The most games Carolina could lose is 9. Georgia Tech has 9 losses, but we hold the tiebreaker. So lowest is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. So Carolina will either be 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th. So they're guaranteed a single bye already. I guess that's part of the good news here. I want you to make a case for what seed you think would be best for the Tar Heels to have.
And just to clarify, we are currently 6th, right?
We are currently 6th.
Yeah. Well, I want to win out. I don't know if we can beat Duke, but if we can win out, and with the exception of the Duke game, just worst case scenario there.
Worst case scenario is we lose at home to Miami and on the road at Virginia Tech.
That's not happening. So let me say this. I want to be 6th, but I want to keep winning. Obviously. But I kind of like that 6th seed because then we only get the single bye, so we get that extra game in there, which could help us. As long as
it would be the 11 or the 14 seed.
Okay, so another win to the win column, just to help keep finding reasons to put us in the NCAA tournament. But why I like the 6th seed is we would play, if we keep winning, keep taking care of business, and I like us to do that with the way we've been playing lately, then we would stay on the side of the bracket with the 2 and the 3 seed. And I think we have a better chance to beat like a Clemson or Louisville in the semis than we would a Duke. So if we could make it to the ACC championship game, man, that would be fantastic. And I think that would guarantee us in the NCAA tournament. And so that's why I kind of like that 6th seed spot. Just because the way it sets us up for further possible advancement in the ACC tournament.
Pack, I really like that too, because I'm sitting here looking at the bracket. That 11 or 14 seed, assuming you can win that game. Like right now, the 11 is Florida State, the 14 is Cal. So assuming you win that game, you would then move on to play, as you said, either Clemson or Louisville. It's a tough challenge, but hopefully you can do it. And that's a quad 1 game, because on a neutral site you get 1 through 50 to be a quad 1. And then you would move on. If you win that game, you would move on to probably play the other of those 2 teams, which is another quad 1 game before getting to the championship. And at that point, if you make it to the championship, you've done enough, because there's 2 quad 1 wins in your bank, right? And so even if you miss out on beating Duke on senior night, you potentially have those 2 quad 1 opportunities if you can win one of them, right? And that's what, because folks, just to be very honest, the way things are looking right now, none of those quad 2 wins are going to move up to a quad 1. I'm just being very honest with us. And so that's where things are looking. Pack, I think the worst thing that could happen to Carolina, let me say it this way, because I'm with you on the 6 seed. So I'll just say the one that I don't want is the 4 seed, because then you would play probably the 5 seed in your first game, which that might not be the worst thing, because that could be a quad 1 game. That actually, I might be talking myself into that in real time here, because if you're the 4 seed, then you're playing either SMU or Wake probably. And man, where is SMU in the net right now? Because if they're top 50, that's the game I want. College basketball net rankings, SMU. Where you at? Where you at, Pony Boys? SMU is 41 right now. Oh, Pack. So Carolina could get there if they were the 5 or the 4 seed, and then was playing SMU in that 4-5 game. There's your quad 1 win. And then, yes, you got to go play Duke right after that, but that's okay because you've got that second quad 1 win. So I could talk myself into that as well, even though I was about to try to talk myself out of it. I think why I like your 6 seed, though, is you got a better chance at 2 quad 1 wins than you do at 1. However, that 1 quad 1, if it's SMU, is you've got a much, much, much better chance, I think, to win that game than you do either Wake or Clemson. So, gosh, man, a bunch of scenarios here. I've talked a lot. What do you think?
Well, the only thing I'll say, I think the 4 seed is really scary because then you get the double bye, so you don't add any like guaranteed, not necessarily guaranteed, but likely W's to the win column. And then, if you say Wake Forest makes it to that 4-5 game against you, well, if you drop that game, you go in the ACC tournament, you don't get any wins.
And by the way, Wake is not a quad 1 game because they're pretty far. They're 64th in the net.
Right. And so that might be the nail in the coffin right there. So that 4 is that's iffy to me. I don't know if I like that.
Yeah. So would you prefer the 5 over the 4 in that scenario?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the bigger point is regardless of the 5 or the 6, I think Carolina is in a better spot by only having a single bye. So they get a chance to get, like, how often have we seen it where the team that's already played a game is playing more fluid? They're better. They're ready to go. Carolina's been using their bench enough right now where it's like, yeah, you're fine to play 2 games in 2 days like that. Right. And so I think that makes a lot of sense, man. And yes, that day 1 win wouldn't do a lot on your resume, right? It's just one of those, you can't lose that game or it hurts you kind of games. But I think it gets you warmed up, does get another win, which looks nice for the committee. If you can get to like 21 wins instead of 20, that's a good thing. And man, I'm just so intrigued. But I think where we would definitely agree, single bye better than double bye. And we wouldn't normally say that, Pack. That's pretty crazy to say.
It is.
But it makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. So, folks, we want to hear from you. Are you with us on that? Do you see and do you agree or do you not agree that it would be better to have a single bye instead of the double bye? I don't think I've ever said that before, but it makes sense this year for what the position Carolina is in. Now, you know how you take care of all of that? You beat Duke on senior night after beating Miami and Virginia Tech, or you just go win the whole blessed ACC tournament and take it out of the selection committee's hands to start with. There you go. Now, will that happen? That's a lot of wins, and we'll see. But it's going to be a fun couple weeks here, Pat Kilby. Stressful probably, but it's going to be fun. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us. It's so much fun today. We've gone pretty long here, but so much good conversation to be able to have. Would love to hear your thoughts on the GM hire, folks, and the fuller front office. Do you like that idea as well? If you've not subscribed to the show on YouTube and audio, help us do it. Come join us on YouTube. If you subscribe, we are less than 100 subscribers away from hitting 10,000. That's crazy, crazy, crazy. You can be the very next one. Come join us on the Locked On Tar Heels Insider. It's a great way to go next level with the show. You get one-on-one conversations with me, free access to all of my stats and charts and data. And also, you can join the Locked On Tar Heels Discord with literally hundreds of other Carolina fans talking about all of this. Literally, that's all we did on Tuesday. I don't think many people in the Discord were working Tuesday because they were just chatting about the GM stuff all day. You guys, It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be right back together tomorrow. Coach Rob will be with me. But until then, Pat Kilby, tell them.
Peace.